This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
I was recently asked to give a talk at TEDxBoulder. The talk was based on a speech I gave in DC a few months past. In this first segment, you will hear my TEDx talk in its entirety. Then I'll come back afterwards to give some context and background. Enjoy. I want to talk about our superpower. Humans have a superpower. And that superpower is our ability to convince ourselves that something is true when it's not. 75% of us have convinced ourselves that we are an imposter or a fraud when it comes to our jobs and careers. Or worse, we've convinced ourselves that we are not worthy and not good enough, that we don't even try. Did you earn that job you have, or were you just lucky? Psychologists refer to this as the impostor syndrome. So what is it? The impostor syndrome is that questioning of our achievements and then living with the fear that someone's going to find out, that we're not good enough, and that we've been faking it, and that we're a fraud. While 75% of us suffer from imposter syndrome, some recent studies have shown that women actually suffer from imposter syndrome at an even higher rate. I'm Phil McKinney. I'm an award-winning author. I host an award-winning nationally syndicated talk radio show. I retired as the Chief Technology Officer for Hewlett-Packard before landing here in Colorado to become the CEO at Cable Labs. I've been on most every national news program, and I've been profiled on newspapers and magazines around the world. With my career, you would think that I would be comfortable with my own achievements. That is not the case. I lived with the majority of my career in the absolute fear that people would find out that I am an imposter with a secret. April 2007, I'm being interviewed for a front page cover profile in the San Jose Mercury News, the newspaper of Silicon Valley. Everything is going great until we get to the last question. And that last question set off an absolute panic attack. My imposter syndrome kicked in and was telling me that the world was now going to figure out that I was a fraud. So what was it that set off the panic attack? Well, what set off the panic attack was a secret that I had protected and had never shared before. And that secret was, I never graduated from college. Now, I know some of you are in your head going, so what? A lot of people never graduate from college and go on and have phenomenal careers. That's the point. When you live with imposter syndrome, whatever you think disqualifies you is the secret you will do anything to protect. And in my case, my secret was going to be revealed on the front page of a newspaper. So April 29, 2007, my executive profile appears on the front pages of the San Jose Mercury News, and there in the sidebar is my secret. He left college without graduating. This was on the front page of the Sunday edition, so all I had to do was sit back and wait for the repercussions, whatever they may be. So Monday morning, I go into the offices at HP and wait. It didn't take me long to figure out what the repercussions were going to be. And those were nothing. The world didn't care. I had spent 25 years nurturing a secret that now was in the full press, and the stress and the fear were gone. I had let my superpower convince me that I was a fraud, and it was a lie. And that's when I figured out that it was the secret that was fueling my imposter syndrome. It was that secret. And by sharing that secret, I took away that power. Now, In reality, I didn't share my secret. My secret was shared for me on the front page of a national newspaper. Not my best choice in revealing a deep personal secret. Now, following this, I've been talking and sharing about my struggles with imposter syndrome, both in talks like this and on my radio show. And the response that I have received has been overwhelming, with people wanting to share their struggles with imposter syndrome. That has opened up my eyes that the imposter syndrome struggle doesn't know anything about career, title, socioeconomic, identity, history. The imposter syndrome is absolutely universal. In fact, I've had team members who work for me who've had such severe cases of imposter syndrome that it was absolutely crippling. Not too long ago, I had a former team member reach out to me to ask for some career advice. We get together, and he was convinced he was going to lose his job. There were some changes going on at the company he was at, and his imposter syndrome had convinced him that there were other people on his team who were better than him, and if those jobs were going to go away, he would be the one to lose the job. But not only that, he had thought about it so much that he convinced himself that not only was he going to lose the job, but that he was going to end up homeless. Yes, we went from everything is fine to being homeless in all of 3 seconds. I stepped in at that point and said, whoa, time out. Your job and your career and skills are highly desired and highly valuable to your employer. And there's no proof that they're even going to cut any jobs. And you've earned all of your accomplishments. You are not a fraud. You are not an imposter. And what happened? What happened was it changed his entire perspective, both on himself, his career, and also his family. He defeated his imposter syndrome by sharing his secret of self-doubt and getting that encouragement that he was not a fraud, he was not an imposter. So let me ask all of you a question. Do you suffer from imposter syndrome? Do you experience those waves of feeling that you're not qualified and then living in the fear that someone is going to find out? Do you find it hard to accept recognition when people walk up to you and say, great job? Do you pass it off of, oh, I was just lucky, I was just in the right place at the right time? Do you suffer from the stress of worrying about whether or not you're going to meet the expectations of others? And in return, you turn yourself into a workaholic thinking that you got to prove yourself. Do you practice self-sabotage? Are you so fearful about the job you have and the work you're trying to deliver that you actually get so fearful you can't even start the work? Example being severe procrastination. Do you suffer from imposter syndrome? If we look around this theater, 75% of the people in this theater are currently or will suffer from imposter syndrome. 75% of us. The question is what do you do about it? What do you do to push back? I'm going to give you 2 actions to try. Now, I'm going to warn you, these will require some risk. You're going to take a little bit of risk here. With risk comes change. What's the first thing? Find a comfortable, safe environment to share your secret. Share the secret that's telling you that you're not good enough. You haven't earned that role or position you're in. Now, in my case, sharing my secret on the front page of a national newspaper or right here on the TEDx stage may not be your choice for sharing your secret. The second, and probably the most important way that you can push back on imposter syndrome, is to be an encourager. Encourage others. If you see somebody with skills and abilities and capabilities that just impress you, don't just think it, tell them. Tell them. The simple act of verbalizing that to them changes their perspective. They begin to see themselves as the world sees them, not as that imposter syndrome film is going around in their head. Do not delay in pushing back on the imposter syndrome. Do not delay. I wasted 25 years of my career believing the lie that I wasn't good enough. So what lie is telling you that you're not good enough, that you're an imposter, that you're a fraud? Whatever that lie is, the opposite is the truth. And a truth will always have more power than a lie we can tell ourselves. Always. So what is that truth about that amazing you? What's the truth about you that's absolutely amazing? Believe that truth, and a new future will unfold. Thank you very much. I'll be right back after this quick break. As I shared in the speech, the response I've received continues to reinforce that imposter syndrome knows no boundaries. Face it, it will affect 75% of us no matter our background, our education, our upbringing, our nationality, our demographic, our gender, or any other dimension you can think of. It is not tied to something about us. It is ourselves being hypercritical of ourselves. What I didn't get to share in my talk was the role fear plays in imposter syndrome. There's only so much you can share in 9 minutes of a TED Talk, and I want to spend the next few minutes giving you a little bit of context on this role of fear. The fear of being found out holds what can be paralyzing. That fear of trying to project what people's reaction is going to be. Now, let's be honest. What is fear? Fear is that emotion that comes from feeling threatened, feeling that you're going to get hurt, or that you're going to be abused. Fear could be the result of fear of being physically impacted. Fear also comes forward when we are worried about how we will be emotionally impacted, emotional abuse. And what does fear stand for? Now, for long-time listeners of the show, you've heard me talk about this in the past, but I'm going to reinforce it. What does fear stand for? It stands for false evidence that appears real. FEAR. We as humans have this innate ability to look at some form of false evidence, and then we take these grand mental leaps, and we can think of all the possible negative outcomes. We can just roll it around in our head and just build up this huge mountain of all the possible bad things that's going to happen. But keep in mind, it's false evidence that appears real. And for me, it was that false evidence, that feeling that I wasn't good enough, that was that constant reminder for me for my imposter syndrome. And that fear appeared very real to me. Why? In my case, I grew up in the 60s, and I was told that to have a good job, have security, be able to have a family, help your kids grow up, is you needed to go to college. That was the truth at the time. And as a result, my imposter syndrome was my fear of not conforming to society's truth. Or, as we would used to say, not keeping up with the Joneses. Now, let me give you a little bit of context about why I didn't finish college. My wife and I met when we were 14 years old. We actually met in Boy Scouts. Yes, Boy Scouts went co-ed in the mid-70s, and my wife was one of the first girls to join. We started dating at 17. We did our senior prom together. And we ended up getting married our sophomore year in college. Not too long after we got married, my wife was injured on the job. She worked 40 hours a week and carried a 17-hour class load for her nursing school at the University of Evansville. When she got injured on the job as a nurse's aide, a patient picked her up, threw her against the wall, and ruptured 2 discs in her back. She could no longer work full-time. If she could not work full-time, she couldn't pay for
her nursing degree, she was going to forfeit her nursing degree. I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago, 5 hours apart. Yes, we were married and we lived 5 hours apart. So I gave up finishing my degree at that moment, took a year off with the support from the university, moved to Evansville, and I worked full-time in a factory in order to pay the bills so that my wife could stay in nursing school. She could continue to do classes. She just couldn't work in the hospital because of her back injury and the subsequent back surgery she had. So I took a year off, and I was actually working for this company called Anchor Industries. I put in their first computer system. I wrote them a bunch of custom programs. Some of those programs actually got to be fairly well known in the back in the Apple II Plus era, if you can think back that far. And after a year, my wife had recovered from her nursing injury. She'd finished her degree. She was just starting to work as a nurse, and then I was going back to school because I still had more to do on my degree. My wife was much closer to her degree, so we prioritized her nursing and delayed my engineering degree. I went back to the University of Illinois, and lo and behold, a company who had seen some of my work at Anchor Industries reached out and offered me a job. Now, I wasn't looking, I wasn't interested in a job, but they were very keen on my specific skills in such that the starting salary they offered me was 3 times the salary my dad was making at that time. And my dad was a design engineer. And so my wife and I discussed it. We made that decision and we made that leap. Now, as a result of that, then, we made it very consciously, but this was the thing that was always rolling around in my head. And what made it even worse for me is as I continued to get additional success, the fear of the imposter syndrome being found out even got worse. Now, people would tell me to get over it. It was no big deal. Even my wife would tell me to get over it. And to be clear, it was something that I struggled with. But what worked for me was the fact that it was revealed for me on the front page of that Mercury News in April 2007. Now, since then, my fear is gone. Now, is all my fear gone? No. Some fear is real, like being chased by a bear. In the innovation game, we will experience fear, the fear of failing, the fear that an idea isn't good enough, as we thought, fear that others' ideas are better, fear that your competitors are going to win. What I learned through my experience of feeling fear related to my imposter syndrome is to test it. Test my fear. Is it true fear or is it false evidence that appears real? Anytime fear rears itself up, ask yourself, is there real evidence to justify this fear? Or is it false? Don't let it get run away from you, because that human ability to take that false evidence and spin it into any and all possible negative outcomes can be very true. And as a result, we need to think about how do we manage that. So once you know that answer, know whether or not it's false evidence or is it real evidence, put your fear in its proper place. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick break. We're going to continue this discussion about my talk that I'm an imposter with a secret. While I'm a regular attender at TED, I never could have imagined the prep that goes into giving one of these talks. In this case of my TEDx talk that you heard in segment 1, I was first approached about 6 weeks ahead of the event. Most of the other speakers had already been approached and agreed. I, in fact, was in the middle of the mountains camping with my grandkids when I got the call asking me to present. Then I learned that there would be 2 to 2.5 hours of practice sessions each and every Tuesday night. That's right, 2 to 2.5 hours of practice sessions every Tuesday. Then in the last week, there would be practice sessions on Tuesdays, Thursday, and Saturday just before the event, which was on a Sunday. Now, TEDxBoulder is a big event. It's like 2,400 people in the audience, sells out every year. Tickets, in some cases, can be hard to come from. But, and I was excited. It was an opportunity to share the subject matter, in this case, about my own struggle with imposter syndrome, in the hopes that it would help other people who maybe hadn't recognized what they were struggling with or coming out with their own struggles. Now, so I got my head wrapped around that this was going to be a major time commitment, 2.5 hours, one evening every week for 6 weeks, plus all these extra practice sessions. Then came the real surprise. Now, the original talk was roughly 45 minutes. I gave it at the old AOL headquarters in Northern Virginia. And I don't know, there was maybe a couple hundred people in the audience, and it was all CEOs or CXO level kinds of executives from leading companies in Northern Virginia. Now, when I was asked to talk, I assumed it would be a normal 18-minute TED Talk. I go to the TED event every year, now being held in Vancouver. That was my expectation. So I showed up at the first practice session with a trim down from 45 minutes to 18 minutes. And boy, let me tell you, that was tough cutting it down. But it was at that first session that I learned that the TEDx talks for Boulder are 9 minutes. Think about that. 45 minutes to 18 minutes to 9 minutes. Now, given how often I give talks and keynotes, the joke is all that you need to give me is 3 talking points and a microphone, and I'm ready to go. And I can fill up an hour, not a problem. To craft this talk down to 9 minutes, now, if you go back and watch the YouTube video over at the TEDx site and you actually clock the time, it was actually 11 minutes, 20 seconds at the event. I would have preferred to have 90 days to prep for a 9-minute talk. Now, to craft this talk down to 9 minutes, I really had to think about just what were those key elements. There was a lot of things in there I just could not cover. I had to chuck it out and really break it down. Now, what I will say about the TEDxBoulder event is they have some of the top presentation coaches, speech coaches that actually help you, figure out what you're going to toss out. Because what you quickly will learn is something that you think is important is not important to the audience. And so, it was a lot of work to get it down to 9 minutes. And then to put kind of icing on the cake for TED Talks, as you can see on the screen, you're expected to memorize it. Memorize it in such a way without making it look like you memorized it. Now, I can honestly say I spent more time on this talk than any other talk in my entire career, bar none. And look, I was part of the senior team that took a company public, and we did the major road show, flying around in a private jet, doing all these cities around the world, leading up to the IPO of our shares, right? And we did a lot of prep for that. This TED Talk had more prep than even that. Now, one, for the content, I wanted to memorize it because, one, for that content, it was important for me to get it right, especially given how many of us struggle with imposter syndrome. When I gave that 45-minute talk in Northern Virginia, the response, the number of people that waited to be able to talk to me after that talk was just overwhelming, and it was just a couple of hundred people. In this case, after I got done with my talk at TEDxBoulder, I was leading right up prior to kind of an intermission, a 30-minute intermission, or no, actually it was a 1-hour intermission between the two sections of the TED event. And they actually had dinner arranged for 2,500 people. And as I was walking out to catch up with my wife and my adult children and others, friends who had come to see my talk, I barely made it out there to even get a chance to sit down and for 5 minutes to grab something quickly to eat because everybody was stopping me. Not because I'm some great speaker, but because of the subject matter. This imposter syndrome can be debilitating, and just giving people the permission to talk about it, to share it, and to confess they struggle with it can be very enlightening and very freeing, and people just wanted to talk about it. Second is this was going to be alive in my hometown. Now, we don't technically live in Boulder, but we do live nearby. So there were going to be people in the audience who knew me, including some of my staff. So I wanted to memorize it. Now, one thing you may not be aware of when it comes to TED or TEDx talks, and I'm sure everybody's watched them on YouTube, etc., or on the TED site. Here's a little behind-the-scenes secret. What you see in the video is not what happens live. Trust me. What you see in the video is not what happens live. In Vancouver, the main event, this is where the main TED Talks are given at the annual TED Conference. I've seen many TED Talks at the main event where the speaker stumbles. They freeze up, they can't remember it, they stop the conference, and they let the speaker either restart the entire talk or pause and pick up just before the stumble. Then the video gets edited, and that's what you see. So in fact, if you're in the live audience watching a TED Talk, you will see speakers stumble. You'll see them lose track of where they are in the memorization. They'll freeze up. They'll fumble something, drop it. They stop, let them restart it to get it right. The saying in TED is more people will see your video than will ever see it live. They focus on that video. Now, the instructions for the TEDxBoulder event was the same. If you stumble, pause, and then pick it up just prior and then move on. Then the magic of video editing will make that mistake disappear forever. Now, in my case, I didn't need to fall back on that. I probably had a couple of fumbles, and I think they might have clipped out one little piece. But the pressure was intense. You should talk to my staff. I was spending hours every day locked into this indoor, kind of an inner conference room that had no windows in it, just doing the speech over and over and over again. But the objective was, I wanted to tell this story. It's a very personal story. It's really a little bit of a confession on what I struggled with in the first 25 years of my career. And then that eye-opening realization that I just wasted a lot of time and a lot of energy. Now, while this is not a normal episode of the show, we don't get typically into these kinds of personal things, I hope you found it useful and informative. If you found yourself struggling with imposter syndrome and need someone to talk to, why don't you hop on over to the Innovators community? This is where I hang out. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it's comprised of people who are interested in innovation. But it's also a great place to connect. You can post your question or your own innovation struggle or imposter syndrome struggle over there, or you can send me a private message in the community, and I will respond. You can post it there. You can send me a message from within the community, and I will respond. If you need someone to share what your imposter syndrome is or share your secret based on what you heard from my talk, then share it. Share it with me. Find somebody else to share it with. And again, the way to do that is to go over to theinnovators.community. Spell that all out. So it's theinnovators.community, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything. You can go there, sign up. It's also where I hang out every day. It's where I'm posting constant stories about innovation and what other companies are doing. So check that out. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break, and we have another episode of 5 minutes to new ideas. We'll be right back. Back in the early days of this show, I would share what I called a killer question in each episode. These questions were designed to be used in your personal team or organization innovation efforts. Now, based on feedback from listeners like you, we've decided to bring it back with some improvements. Each episode of the Killer Innovations has a segment that I'm now calling 5 Minutes to New Ideas. They are designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about your business, your products, your services, and yourself by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. These questions are designed to force you to look beyond the obvious and to uncover those ideas and opportunities you never before considered. So, get out your notebook and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 Minutes to New Ideas. Have you ever purchased a product that others hated? Or what about the opposite? Have you ever seen others using a product or service that you absolutely despised? The flip side to any positive emotional connection is a negative one. If you are producing a product or service that is inspiring enough that some people love what you are doing, there will be others who will dislike your product with an equal passion. Plenty of companies trade on the fact that they represent something the mainstream culture will find offensive or questionable. Look at any business that sells rebellion or greedy counterculture message. They target the niche by offending anyone that is not part of that in crowd. It doesn't even have to be a niche. Even more mainstream products, such as those found in the tobacco or alcohol industries, subtly sell themselves as being a little dangerous and outside the norm. The question for you is to decide whether there is any benefit or purpose to being strategically disliked or being perceived by some as, quote, not us. Will it benefit you and your product to deliberately set yourself in opposition to certain social groups? And if so, how do you accomplish this? This strategy can be positive if it allows you to be clearly identifying what you are about and who you are targeting. But be careful. This approach is risky. The important thing is to carefully walk the line between creating connection on one side and provoking rejection on the other. For example, look at the growing trend of restaurants and gastropubs that refuse to offer any substitutions on their menu. Father's Office in LA's Culver City has great burgers, but only serves them one way, with caramelized onions, bacon, blue cheese, and arugula. No ketchup. If you want ketchup, you'll have to sneak in your own packets and be careful that the waitstaff doesn't catch you using them. You will be called out, embarrassed, and actually ostracized. You'd think that a restaurant with this kind of draconian policy against customization would be dead in the water. Not so. If you want to eat at Father's Office, you'll be waiting for hours for a table. It's packed day and night. Some people hate Father's Office, and I've had friends in LA who flat out refuse to set foot in the place. That's fine. The people who love it really, really love it, both for the food and for its slightly contrarian atmosphere. The negative emotional response it provokes in other people only solidifies the fans' passion for the place. So what about your product or service? Who will not buy your product because they feel something is objectionable about it? Not something most of us think about. For example, have you ever tried to market your product based on what it doesn't supply rather than on what it does? Can you use the thing that's objectionable about your product to create a community of customers? Ask yourself, how could you eliminating the objection help or hurt you? By looking at your product or service differently from the perspective of something objectionable, you may find that one thing that will set you apart. I'm Phil McKinney, and thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you have any comments or suggestions, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. Beyond this show, I write about my personal experiences of being in the innovation game for the last 2 decades. Topics include innovation, creativity, culture, team building, metrics, frustrations, leadership, and how to win. You can find that content over at philmckinney.com. You can also find out information about my book, Beyond the Obvious, including extensive excerpts over at beyondtheobvious.com. You can find hardcover, digital, and audio versions of my book on Amazon or wherever you get your books from. Now, the reason I started this show back in 2005 was to pay back my early mentor. My first mentor, Bob Davis, invested an immense amount of time in training and coaching me, which had a major impact on my career. When I went back and asked him how I could pay him back, he laughed and said I couldn't. I had to pay it forward. If I could ask for a favor, could you help me pay it forward? How? 1, by giving us a rating wherever you get your podcast, as that helps spread the word. And 2, by telling others about the show. If you want to be part of the conversation between the shows, I hang out in the Innovators community on Slack. The Innovators community is a private community of vetted innovators who help each other succeed. Check it out at theinnovators.community. This episode of Killer Innovations was produced by the Innovators Network. You can find the show notes and the entire show catalog going back to 2005 at killerinnovations.com. I'll talk to you next week, and in the meantime, go out and change the world with your killer innovation. Bye-bye.